Do you want some ideas for using pattern paper on 5x7 cards without making any scraps? Hi, I'm Jess from JessCrafts.com, and I'm here to help you make the most of your crafty time and supplies. So let's get making. Today I have a 6x8 pattern paper pack. I have ideas and templates over at JessCrafts.com for 6x6 pattern paper and 5x7 cards, but today is 6x8 and making a 5x7 card. We're going to get started by cutting the paper according to the template. Today's template is super easy. You're going to take one piece of 6x8 paper and cut it in half to 4x6. I'm going to use this blue dot paper. This paper is double-sided, but it's kind of a unique double-sided because the patterns on each side are very similar. The scale just changes. This is the Sherbet collection from scrapbook.com, so it's exclusive to them, and they do have coordinating cardstock packs. So if you like to have cardstock that matches perfectly, this might be a great one for you. So just give you a quick flip of some of those other patterns, and then we'll get started with our cutting. Okay, so we need to, according to the One Sheet Wonder, cut this to 4x6. I have it on the 8-inch side, and I will make a cut at 4 inches. Next up, it tells you that you're going to need a circle in a 2.5-inch diameter. Now, the key with these is it doesn't have to be a circle, and it doesn't have to be 2.5 inches. I'm basically just saying cut a shape out of the center, because that shape is going to be your focal point where you put your image. So today, I'm going to use hexagons. I have these nested dies from scrapbook.com. They have a couple different shapes out there, and just to make it interesting and mix it up, I'll use the hexagons. I also need some coordinating cardstock, and for this particular sketch, I like to cut the cardstock first because I like to cut one of my mats out of the cardstock. So I know that this is 8.5 long, and my mat needs to be 1/4 inch bigger, which means my mat will be 4 1/4 on one side. So that's half of the sheet. I'm going to take it to the 11-inch side, and I'm going to cut it down to 6 1/4 because that's the other measurement. I cut 6 1/4. Now I can cut this in half at 4 1/4, and I have the only 2 pieces of cardstock that I will need to make both of the cards, because this sketch makes 2 cards with one 6x8 piece of paper. Now, I need to cut the shape out of the center. I will take my pattern paper. I'll decide, do I want my hexagon pointing to the top, or do I want a flat one on the top? I think it looks a little more dynamic with the point at the top. I also like the idea of using a different shape because I picked a polka dot paper. I think it adds a little bit of interest and breaks it up versus picking a circle, which would also have the same sort of round sides. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut my mat for my hexagon out of the same piece of cardstock. Then this one will layer on top, and there is going to be a hole here in your pattern paper, but you're going to cover it. And I really suggest using mats on this one because it gives you a little bit more forgiveness. If you didn't use a mat and instead you cut the hole and you flip it, then you have to make sure that you've centered everything exactly. So, with the magic of pre-planning, I have some cardstock and pattern paper cut out. So you see, now when I go to layer it up, I have the hole in the center. It absolutely doesn't matter because it's going to get covered up. I actually want to use the larger dots for my background, so I'm going to put my adhesive on the smaller dots. You will want to, whichever side of the paper that you are going to want as the pattern for your focal point is the same side of the paper you're going to want to put your dies on. So because I wanted the little dots to be for my focal point, I made sure that I placed the die on top of the little dot side, because otherwise, and it's minor, but you could see sometimes die cuts leave a little bit of an impression behind. Again, because you're covering it with the mat, it probably won't matter, but just something to keep in mind. Not a super big deal. More important if you're not using a mat. All right, I actually purchased some pre-made 5x7 cards at my local Michael's because you can't efficiently make 5x7 cards out of 8.5 by 11 paper. Those of you who make 5x7 cards on a regular basis, like that is primarily what you make, let me know in the comments, where do you get your cardstock or your card bases? Do you cut down your 8.5 by 11s? Do you buy pre-made? Do you have a good cheap source? Because these kind of pricey to buy them at Michael's. I'm going to center this on my 5x7 card. It should leave about 1/2 inch all around. Then add the adhesive behind here. And I'm going to want to make sure things are nice and level. I could just tape this down here, and it's not a big deal, but it could kind of like leaves a little bit of a depression there because they're not level. So I'll just take a scrap of cardstock and place it behind there. If I can find a scrap of cardstock here on the mess that I'm calling my desk right now. Okay, scrap of cardstock. I normally I would pre-record these and then do a voiceover, but I'm just trying something different to see if I can provide a better explanation if I go through the individual process of making one card. Okay. That's basically what the template tells you to do. And then you would make a whole second one. Now I'm going to finish off the card by adding some cute stamps. I'm going to be using the Pool Party stamp set from Fawn. I'm going to show you just a touch of my Copic coloring because I'm a slow Copic colorer in general. I know I'm probably not like the slowest Copic colorist out there, but I know that not everyone who is interested in a no scrap template loves to watch coloring. And so that's why I don't always color stamps in my videos, even the ones where I do a voiceover, just because I know I like to mix it up and give ideas for everyone. Taking my N3, I'm not worried about shadows. This is not a scene card. So where the shadows are doesn't really matter. It's just that by adding some shadow areas, I will give it a more realistic look and the character will look like it has some dimension to it. So for instance, if I want his belly to look round, which is kind of implied by the lines of the stamp, then I want to make sure that I add shadows to, so my darkest color to each of the sides. And by having that darker color on the sides and a lighter color towards the center will pop out and the belly will look a bit more rounded. Then I thought about little things like drop shadows, because this hair on the unicorn would cast a shadow downward. I'm going to pull my color choices from the pattern paper and the cardstock that I chose. I had chose a purple cardstock for my mats just to add a second color because the original paper is just blue and white. And so I thought it would be interesting to add some more color to that. When I color the inner tube, I want to keep the same things in mind by adding my darkest color here on the edges, the outside edge and the inside edge, and then using my lighter color towards the center, I will get the impression that the inner tube is rounded, and that is the most important thing for giving these stamps some life. If you are someone who doesn't particularly love to color, or somebody who is maybe intimidated by it, let's say, you like the idea of coloring, but when you've tried in the past, you get a lot of bleeding outside of the lines, or not really the results you expected. I will say that Fawn is one of the stamps that I recommend to beginning colorists because the black lines on their stamps are actually quite thick, and in general, a more cartoony look is going to, because their stamps, all their animals have a more cartoon look than a realistic look. In general, those are going to be a little bit more friendly towards a beginning colorist, and you're less likely to get bleeding outside of the thicker lines of their stamps than you are out of some of the thinner lined stamps that are out there. So if you want to give coloring a shot, or if you think, like certain companies, why am I having more trouble with them? Think about how that might be playing in. Also, you definitely want to make sure you have an alcohol-friendly ink pad, an alcohol marker-friendly ink pad if you're going to use alcohol markers. And you'll want to make sure that the paper that you're working on. I'm using Neenah Classic Crest. However, there are many great papers out there, and this is not even necessarily the #1 recommended one. I just find that it's easily available as a crafter. All my stamps are colored. I don't normally purchase coordinating dies, but with this particular Lawn Fawn set, them being kind of small, and me, when I first saw the set, I fell in love with all the critters on the inner tube, and I know you don't need to cut the center out of the inner tube for the full effect. It's actually, once you put them on, you won't really notice the sides, but that was kind of why I thought to purchase the coordinating dies. And I'm going to glue this on with a little arrangement. I also have some speech bubbles from the set. This particular Lawn Fawn release, this is the summer of 2022. It had a lot of different little cute sayings, and these speech bubbles were included in this stamp set, but then there's another like coordinating stamp set with all these punny little tiny sentiments that go in a different speech bubble stamp set. And I was weirdly excited about teeny tiny sentiments. It's not something you would necessarily think would be super exciting part of a release, but I think just because it's nice to be able to squeeze in a little sentiment into a small space on a card, and that's something that's come up for me. And also they were puns, and I really like puns, and so I knew I would be able to, like if I was looking for a dog pun, I would be able to go to this one stamp set and there would be a couple to choose from. But anyway, instead of using foam tape, I glued a little bit of random cardstock that I got in, who knows what, some kind of packaging behind my unicorn so that he has a little bit of dimension. Then I'm going to stamp my sentiments still. And also, this glue holder is one of my most used crafty tools in a sense, because my glue is always sitting in there when I'm not using it, and it allows the glue to stay at the bottom, so it's always ready to go. I love Barely Art glue, but before I got this glue holder, it's Glue Lounger, which is from Make It by Marco on Etsy, and she did send it to me, so disclaimer there, but I would get frustrated because if you store it like this, then when you're ready to use it, you gotta wait for the glue to come down, and then sometimes there's air bubbles in it. It's a whole thing, so it's one of those things I didn't even know I needed it, but now I don't know how I lived without it. This is a brand new stamp, so I'm gonna take my Stamper's Secret leather tool. It's a stamp conditioner. You could use an eraser or just a piece of leather, but this one's cute. And that gives me a slightly better impression the first time through. You don't need to use an alcohol-friendly ink for this. I'm using it because it's what I have out already. I'm going to stamp the Stay Cool sentiment. I like that. That means it will be great for... Oop, I lost my speech bubble. I think it will be... There's a happy summer sentiment. But, as you know, I donate a lot of my cards. I want this to be useful, all the time, anytime. So I'm going to use Stay Cool. And I think I'll glue this directly down just so that they're at a slightly different height. If you are interested in donating cards, there's a page on jesscrafts.com that has a whole list of places you can donate your cards. Also, you can get jokes to put inside of your cards if you're a little bit intimidated about what to write inside of a card that you're sending away to someone you don't know personally. Okay, so if you found this video inspiring, I will leave you a link to another video that you can check out. I would appreciate it if you give this video a like or subscribe to the channel for more ideas. And I leave links to all of the products that I used in the video description below. Bye.